I want you to look at this table carefully. It shows how several political parties were doing in the federal election in Germany's parliament from 1924 to 1933. The political party in red represents the Nazis, or what would later become the Nazis. Notice how their popularity actually went down over the course of the 1920s, only to spike from 1930 onward. In high school, most of us have been taught that the Nazis rode a tidal wave of anti-Semitism and fanatical hatred of the Treaty of Versailles to victory. But that doesn't seem to gel with the evidence we have here. Did people just temporarily stop hating the Jews and the Treaty of Versailles during the second half of the 1920s, then resume in 1930? Yes and no, or mostly no. The clue lies here. Remember, the Great Depression hit the world, Germany included, at the end of 1929. Unemployment and bank runs hit the common people hard. And guess which party was ready to offer solutions for desperate ears? These guys. So through a combination of promising jobs, pointing fingers at internal enemies, and terrorism, the Nazi Party rode a tidal wave of popular votes in the elections. More or less. But what about the Nazis' rock-bottom popularity during the previous 6 years? Partly it was because the Nazi Party had been outlawed in 1923. But if the Nazis had been preying on feelings of revenge and anti-Semitic hatred, there should have been no shortage of that in the 1920s. And the outlawing of the Nazis certainly didn't stop their proxy, the NSFP, from running in the elections, but they failed miserably in 1924. Here's a simplistic explanation. Let's not discount the effect of political and economic stability during the second half of the 1920s. It was the very fact that the Weimar government seemed to be finally turning things around that got people to ignore the Nazis' venomous rhetoric. Folks could do their work and raise their families. But when that confidence was shattered in 1930, when mass unemployment and financial ruin reared its ugly head again, that was when people voted for the Nazis, who knew exactly which psychological strings to pull. Though of course, thuggery and political violence persuaded a lot of people too. Look at these election posters. They might not be exactly what you'd expect. This one seems to fit the mold of hateful, explosive rhetoric. This one stirs up anti-Versailles feelings. But from 1932 onward, Nazi election posters take a much more grassroots angle. This one promises work, freedom, and bread. This one promises justice against the evils of international finance. And this one shows a bunch of people down on their luck, possibly unemployed, whose last hope is Hitler. If you cover up the bottom part, you couldn't even tell it's a Nazi poster. And this one, in 1933, seems to combine the hateful rhetoric with the grassroots angle. A farmer clears away the so-called rubbish of society. That's how the Nazis got their votes. By appealing to not only ideology, but when the economy was failing, also appealing to people's desperation. This pattern is both a comfort and a curse. On one hand, people vote with their stomachs. Ideologies and beliefs will only get you so far, but people will still choose whoever they think will help them just get on with life. It's kind of disappointing, knowing how mundane we really are, but in a way, it's kind of comforting too. We're just hungry people at the end of the day, and maybe the most effective political movements are just the ones that are most helpful to the most number of people. Or at least they promise to be. But it's also disturbing. How do we explain the transition from our image of the decent but desperate folks who voted for the Nazis in 1930 to the supporters of a murderous regime? That's not so easily explained. A lot of brutalization and terrorizing, but also a lot of personal weakness. What's also disturbing is this, and this is what I want you viewers to remember. It's not the most rhetorically charged, most logical, most high-minded, or even the loudest movements that win support. Rather, it's the ones that can read people the most accurately and promise accordingly, who know how to push people's buttons, who can weaponize desperation. They're the ones that win support. And that's something to think about when we see the swirling maelstrom of political ideas at play in our world right now. So where do we go from there? This is a bit ivory tower, but my take on it is this. Look after the people around you. Remember that we're all at heart frail, fallible, and gullible. Build communities, systems, and societies that understand how frail we are, understand what we need, and what's more, work to meet those needs. And I would stress that material needs should not be ignored in favor of ideals. Because if we fail to remember how frail we really are, how easily we grumble, and how easily misled, there's always someone looking to make those popular and usually false promises for their own gain. And those are rarely good people. Thanks for watching. See you next time.